articles. Now we're going to go into the amendments. The formal amendments are written changes to the Constitution, and we have 27 so far. The first 10 are the Bill of Rights. And know that it's been a while since we've had one. The last amendment was ratified in 1992, almost 20 years ago. And the fact that we only have 27 that have been passed in 225 years or so means that it's kind of hard to do. It takes a lot to get one passed. So let's go through the Bill of Rights first. The first Bill of Rights is the First Amendment. It guarantees these 5 freedoms: religion, speech, press, assembly, which is the right to protest, and petition, to complain to your government. You do need to memorize those. Some people remember RAPS, R-A-P-P-S, as the first initials of all of those. Next, Amendment 2, right to bear arms. You can keep and carry a gun if licensed properly. So everybody should know that. Amendment 3 is kind of out of use anymore. They can't make people have to quarter troops. They can't take over your home to put troops in there. We don't really need this one anymore because we have barracks for our troops to live in, but it was important at that time. Fourth Amendment is one of people's favorites. No searches or seizures. They can't search you or take evidence without a warrant issued by a judge, and they have to have probable cause for that warrant. But they can if there is they can search you if there's probable cause, and we'll learn about that in a bit. Amendment 5 is the right to due process. If you're accused of a crime, these are the rights that you get. You can't be made to testify against yourself. That's when you plead the fifth. Also, they can't do double jeopardy. They can't try to convict you twice of the same crime. Also, this amendment refers to eminent domain, which I don't have written here, but the idea that the government can take your home if they give you fair market value, so write that down. Next, Amendment 6 is your right to a speedy trial and an attorney, and if you can't afford one, they will provide one for you. Next is Amendment 7, where you get the right to a jury also in civil trials when people are bringing lawsuits against you, as long as it's for more than $20, which is kind of outdated. The 8th Amendment talks about punishment. No cruel or unusual punishment. They cannot set your bail to be too high for the crime, and jail sentences cannot be too harsh or excessive. But the death penalty has not been ruled to be cruel or unusual punishment. The Ninth Amendment is a protection of unlisted rights or unenumerated rights. Basically, it says that just because a right isn't listed in the Constitution doesn't mean we don't have it. This was put in because a lot of the Federalists were concerned that a Bill of Rights that specifically listed only certain rights could be used against people if they wanted certain rights, especially the right to privacy, as it has been used to verify in recent years through Roe v. Wade and Griswold v. Connecticut. Now we're going to hit the last amendment in the Bill of Rights, which is the 10th Amendment, powers reserved for the states or the people. Basically, this is where we get a lot of our idea of federalism from, that any power that the federal government is not given by the Constitution goes to the states. So this is used a lot to argue for states' rights. So that's the end of the Bill of Rights. Now we're going to move on to the next rights. Okay, the 11th Amendment is kind of boring and might seem irrelevant today. It basically says that a state cannot be sued by a citizen of another state. It suits against states. So that's really, it doesn't get talked about very much. Amendment 12 was really important because when our country first started, the president, whoever got first place in the presidential election vote was president. Whoever got second place would be vice president. But sometimes as parties develop, that would mean that the vice president and president would be of different parties. So now, because of the 12th Amendment, the president and vice president are elected on separate tickets. So we vote separately for president and vice president, but they do generally pair them up together, so you know who to vote for if you like one or the other. Okay, that's the 12th Amendment. President and vice president are elected on separate tickets. Now on to the 13th Amendment, which is more famous. It abolished slavery. It was passed right after the Civil War. So slavery could no longer happen. The only exceptions are when in jail. You can be asked to commit, to do certain acts. Next, 14th Amendment was what set up citizenship. This also came after the Civil War, and it said that if you were born in the United States or become naturalized after you're born here, you are a citizen. So if you're born in the USA or you are born of American parents, or if you become naturalized, you are a citizen. So they can't deny you citizenship if like you're a slave. It also has the Equal Protection Clause in it, which says that all people are entitled to equal protection under the law. So this is where a lot of discrimination cases originate out of. And also the Second Due Process Clause, which says that no state may deny anyone of their rights before the law. So this starts to apply all of the Bill of Rights to the states. Going on to the 15th Amendment is the guarantee of voting rights for every race. They could no longer discriminate against race in voting. It gave African Americans the right to vote. The 16th Amendment was the first time they decided to allow the national government to allow income taxes. So I always think of it as when you turn 16, you often is when you get your first job, maybe because you want to pay for a car or something like that. So that's when you first start paying taxes. So the 16th Amendment allows for income tax. Also, back to these, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are known as the Civil War Amendments because they were passed immediately after the Civil War. And they also got rid of the 3/5 compromise. Back to 17, which I don't know that I put in here. 17th Amendment, it was the one that said that senators should be elected directly and no longer by the states. So just a second and I will get that for you. Okay, so here we are. It says the popular election of senators, meaning instead of the state legislatures choosing the 2 senators for the state, the people get to vote directly for them. So I put a picture of our senators, Richard Lugar and Dan Coates. 18th Amendment should be easy to remember is the amendment that got rid of alcohol. It made alcohol legal. And at 18 years old, you cannot drink alcohol legally, so that's how I remember that. The 19th Amendment was the amendment that gave women the right to vote. It's called women's suffrage. Suffrage means the right to vote, so putting women in front of it means fighting for women to have the right to vote. Okay, and that 19th Amendment gave them that, and that was passed in 1919, or proposed in 1919, so that'll help you remember that. And then the 20th Amendment moved Inauguration Day from March to January 20th. So I used that date to help me remember the 20th Amendment. Basically, presidents would be elected in November, and then they wouldn't get sworn in until March. So that was about 5 months that the old president, who wasn't going to get to be president anymore, could do all sorts of things to make trouble, and they call that the lame duck period. So they wanted to shorten that period up because they didn't need as much time for the ballots to travel across country by wagon anymore. So they moved Inauguration Day to January 20th, and this here is a picture of Obama's inauguration in 2009. 21st Amendment, everybody will always remember this one because of the liquor store. It ended prohibition where alcohol was legal again if you are 21 years old. So 21, you are allowed to drink alcohol legally, and that might help you remember that it was the end of prohibition. The 22nd Amendment limited the president to 2 terms. 22, 2 terms. But it also allows him to have 10 years. So it's 2 terms, but 10 years. And if a term is 4 years long, we wonder how we get to 10. Well, the reason is you get your 2 terms, but if you finished off a previous president's term because he was maybe assassinated or something and served no more than 2 years of it, you can still run for 2 of your own. And this was passed after FDR because he served into his 4th term and then died in office, and they wanted to prevent that from happening any longer. I skipped the 23rd, so we're going to... Okay, so back to the 22nd Amendment. The presidential term limits that he gets 2 terms that are 10 years. 2 terms equals 8, and then 2 more years of a previous president's term. And FDR was the only president to serve more than that. He served 4 terms, or he died in his 4th term. The 23rd Amendment is where the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., was given 3 electoral votes. Before this time, the people that lived in the District of Columbia did not get to vote for president because they didn't have any electoral votes. Only states got them, so they added 3 because that's the minimum number to the District of Columbia. They still do not have representation in Congress, though. They still do not have a representative in Congress. The next one is the 24th Amendment, which banned poll taxes. Poll taxes were a way of keeping African Americans from voting in the South. So they banned that so that the South could no longer disenfranchise the African Americans. So they didn't make people have to pay to vote anymore. The 25th Amendment talks about presidential succession. When a president dies or is too sick to govern, the vice president takes over. The best example of that would be, that you might know, is when John F. Kennedy died, LBJ took over, or when FDR died, Truman took over. So things like that. And then also, lastly, is the 26th Amendment, which allowed 18-year-olds the right to vote. This was passed after the Vietnam War because they said if you can die for your country, you should be able to vote, too. So, there is the end of the amendments.